As they pulled out of the hotel parking lot, Abby glanced over at Sean. He looked back and smiled. I didn't get a chance to tell you. You look great. Thank you, Abby said, blushing. My being forward and aggressive at times doesn't bother you, does it? I can't say I'm used to it, but it fits you, and I like being around you. It's refreshing, you know, he admitted, looking her in the eye. She beamed. I thought the same thing about you. Confident, easy to be with, not threatened by an aggressive female. Don't sweat it, Sean said. We're in the same boat. Not looking for a relationship, content with who we are, but bam, we hit it off. Being nervous is only natural. They drove on in an easy silence until Abby asked, How long until you'll be in your new place? Sean took a minute to think it over. Well, if I get a hold of the first wave of people I need to contact and pick up my list of supplies, I figure tomorrow, the next day at the outside. Abby's jaw dropped. You can't be serious, she blurted. It's not fit to live in like it is, and it's still cold out, for Christ's sake. Only at night. It warms up pretty good during the day, and it doesn't get that cold. Look at old Myra. She lived there all year long at over twice my age. Besides, I've survived worse. We had a saying in my unit. The only easy day was yesterday, and I've had a lot of easy days lately, so this will be good. It'll give me an incentive to get the work done quicker. I think you're crazy, she said, shaking her head. Thank you, Sean answered evenly. Maybe that's why I haven't been able to put you in a category. You're not intimidated by women, by a job where you're required to be Superman, or by a staggering project house like you just bought. You have an easy confidence about everything. You sound like my brother Eric, and I'll tell you like I tell him. I get nervous and scared too, just like everybody else, Sean admitted in a serious tone. We're here, Abby said excitedly and pulled off the road in front of a small stone building close to the road. Used to be a blacksmith shop, she explained. Come on, the house is out back. She led him around the dark stone building, and Sean could see lights to a house about 20 yards back. Abby took Sean's arm as they walked across the yard. My daddy'll try and come off gruff to scare you away, but he's just trying to be protective. He's really just a big teddy bear. If my brother Bobby's home, we can ask him about a skirmish or battle at your house. He's kind of an expert on small, local, out-of-the-way battles and skirmishes and such. Most of it's documented, I guess, if you know where to look. It's kind of a hobby of his. That you, girl? A deep baritone voice rumbled out of the darkness in a distinctive Virginia drawl. They looked in the direction the voice had come from, and Sean saw a figure moving back and forth slowly on a glider on the front porch. Yes, Daddy, it's me, she said cheerfully. Who you got with you, Abby? The voice droned as they got closer. Your mama know you're coming? No, we just dropped by, Daddy. I haven't talked to Mama since yesterday. They walked up the steps and stood before the shadow on the swing. Daddy, this is my friend Sean Murphy. Sean, this is my daddy, Cyrus Dalton. The shadow stood, taking the form of a large man, towering above Sean's 6-foot frame by a good 4 inches, and outweighing him, Sean figured, by at least 60 pounds. Cyrus Dalton extended his large paw, and Sean took it, fully expecting the man to crush his hand, which he did. In his military career, where machoism ruled, Sean had learned a trick or two about dealing with grip crushers who tried to intimidate with crushing handshakes. Pleased to meet you, sir, Sean said evenly, holding his own on the grip and keeping an even smile, not wincing at the large man's crippling grip. Huh, Cyrus Dalton grunted at the draw. Another slick-talking Yankee trying to take advantage of a small-town southern girl, eh? Daddy, be nice, Abby warned. He's my friend. I brought him here to talk business. That's so, Cyrus grunted. Abby, don't give him a hard time. It's understandable. The father of a beautiful, intelligent woman like yourself being protective, I understand completely. Huh. Cyrus Dalton grunted again, sitting back down and indicating chairs to Abby and Sean. Well, I guess you might as well sit down. Daddy, Abby protested, stomping her foot and looking as if she were going to pout. Thank you, Sean said simply, taking his seat. So, what business brings you by this lake, girl? Well, Daddy, Sean just came into possession of a whole mountain of antiques, and I told him you'd be the best man in the area to appraise them and give Sean some advice on what to sell and what he might want to keep or restore or throw out. There's a bit of everything. An estate sale of some such? Not exactly, Daddy. You know the old Connell place between here and Front Royal? She asked. Can't say as I do, he said after thinking a moment. Well, Sean here just bought it. It needs a lot of work. It's been sitting empty since '51. Let me guess, he rumbled, and this slick young Yankee's gonna restore it, right? Cyrus laughed, a deep, resonant belly laugh. Daddy, Abby warned. The thing is, the house has been boarded up, and all the furniture, fixtures, crates, trunks, clothes are still there. Never been touched. Cyrus stopped laughing and peered at Sean and Abby in the darkness. The hell you say, girl? Cyrus, stop that cussing. A tall woman in a simple house dress and apron had come out to the front door and was looking sternly at Cyrus. At a glance, it would have been easy to pick Abby and her mother as mother and daughter anywhere. She looked like a silver-haired, older version of her daughter. The same features and her sparkling green eyes were evident, even in the shadows on the porch. Hi, Mama, Abby said, jumping up and embracing her mother. Hi, dear, her mother returned the embrace, eyeing Sean over her daughter's shoulder. Mama, this is my friend Sean Murphy, Abby said, turning and introducing Sean to her mother. Sean, this is my mama, Elizabeth Dalton. Sean stood and took her offered hand and bowed slightly, saying, It's a pleasure, ma'am. It's easy to see where Abby gets her good looks from. She smiled warmly at him. Flattery will only get you so far in this house, son, but thank you. At my age, it's nice to be thought of as pretty now and again. Huh, Cyrus Dalton grunted from the shadows. Child, you should have called. I'd have waited dinner for y'all if I'd known you were coming, but I can heat up some leftovers in a minute if you like. No, Mama. Thanks, but Sean and I are going out to dinner. I just brought him by so he'd know where the place is to meet Daddy. Sean just came into a whole house full of antiques, and I told him Daddy would be the most honest person around here to appraise them and give him some advice on how to dispose of them. Do tell, Mr. Murphy, do you collect? No, ma'am. I know next to nothing about antiques except for a few pointers Abby gave me this afternoon. Huh, Cyrus grunted. Tell you what, boy, Cyrus rumbled. I'll give you $1,000 for the whole lot sight unseen. I don't think so, sir. I don't know, boy, Cyrus said, scratching his chin. Sounds pretty fair to me. I'm taking a big chance. I might be buying firewood. No offense, sir, but I wasn't born yesterday, and I know you weren't either. I might be a Yankee, by birth anyway, but I'm not stupid. I may not be an expert like yourself, but I learned enough from your daughter today, who, if she knows half of what she said she did, I'd be a real fool to listen to any talk like that, Sean stated firmly in a voice that said, Don't mess with me. Huh, Cyrus grunted. Well said, Elizabeth Dalton applauded. Sean, don't you let him bully you. Abby, would you and Sean like something to drink? I have a cherry pie in there, too. Abby shook her head. No thanks, Mama. I promised Sean the best steak he had ever eaten. I don't want him to say I backed out of my deal. You buying him dinner tonight, girl? Cyrus questioned, arching his eyebrows. Damnedest thing I ever heard, he grumbled. Cyrus, watch your cussing, Elizabeth scolded. Well, yes, Daddy. I'm buying him dinner. He starts on that house, he's gonna be bankrupt inside a month. This may be the last good meal he gets. It's the least I can do after selling it to him. They all laughed easily. Well, Sean, you have Abby bring you round some Sunday for supper. Leastways, you'll get one good meal in you before you go to the poorhouse. Thank you. Yes, ma'am, that would be nice. Sean accepted with a polite nod. Oh, Daddy, is Bobby around? Abby inquired, almost as an afterthought. Nope, haven't seen him since yesterday. And he's supposed to help me with that trestle table and chairs today. What do you want him for? Well, we found what looked like a bunch of bullet holes in Sean's house, and I told him they were likely from the Civil War. I told Sean Bobby might be able to tell him some of the history of the house. Maybe if there was a battle or a skirmish fought there, she said, shrugging. Huh, Cyrus grunted. Like it's not there for bored deer hunters just wanting something to shoot. You say there's some nice pieces in this house, girl? Abby just nodded. Yes, Daddy. It's a wonder somebody hadn't looted it years ago. You might have yourself a real fine boy, he added, looking at Sean and nodding his head slowly as if accessing the possibilities. Yes, sir, a real find. Saying their goodbyes, they made their way back to Abby's BMW, Sean taking notes even in the darkness. It looked as if Abby had washed it since their foray this morning. They pulled out onto the highway and headed southeast. I hope you don't have any more stops planned, Abby. I'm starving. Nothing before we eat, Abby said mischievously. Sean took note when they got on Route 17 headed toward Warrenton. He had come through this way many times commuting between Norfolk and back home in Ohio. Sean's thoughts strayed to his brother in the easy silence that fell between he and Abby while she drove. He wondered how Eric was doing, and whether he had started picking himself up like he said he would. Here we are, Abby said, bringing him back to the present. She looked over at him and smiled. You're in for a treat, she said. Come on. They got out of the car. Sean noticed they were at a brick-fronted restaurant that sat close to the highway. He had seen it 1,000 times driving through the area, but had never stopped. It was a quaint-looking mom-and-pop type place. Ben and Mary's. Yes, mom and pop, he thought. He doubted very much that he'd be impressed, but he smiled at Abby, who seemed excited, so he made a mental note to be fair and keep an open mind. His first surprise came when they walked in. It didn't have the hurry-up, cheap diner atmosphere he had been expecting. There was a laid-back, deep-styled elegance to the place. Pastel with its light blue walls and real linen tablecloths. It almost made him feel underdressed. They were greeted warmly and led back to their table. Surprise number 2. The restaurant was deep and roomy, and not cramped and diner-like, like it appeared from the road at first glance. They sat and ordered drinks. Abby ordered Kahlua and cream. Sean kept it simple and ordered a bud. Sean looked the menu over. Abby folded hers and laid it in front of her. I already know what I want, she said by way of explanation. I think Daddy liked you. She smiled as she spoke like something was very funny, and Sean didn't get the joke. Her smile extended through her green eyes, and they seemed to dance in the soft light. Huh. Sean imitated Cyrus Dalton's grunt as he tried to look the menu over, but his eyes kept being drawn back to Abby's, and he couldn't remember ever having sat this close to a more beautiful woman. The waitress brought their drinks, breaking the spell. Are y'all ready to order yet, or do y'all need a few more minutes? The waitress asked, pleasantly eager. No, we're ready, I think, Abby stated, throwing a questioning glance at Sean, who nodded and skimmed the menu hurriedly as if making up his mind. I'll have the queen-cut prime rib, Abby said matter-of-factly. Baked potato with gobs of sour cream, and buttered green beans, and French dressing on my salad. She smiled over at Sean as the waitress wrote furiously. Sean just sat there gazing back at Abby until the waitress coughed politely, and he realized they were waiting for him. He lost a few moments swimming in Abby's eyes. Just bring me the biggest steak you have. Baked potato with butter only. You get another side dish, the waitress insisted. Green beans and French on my salad too, this time anticipating her. Then he went back to looking at Abby, completely captivated. This place is nice, he said, stumbling for small talk. One of my favorites, she agreed, nodding eagerly. Wait until the food comes. I'll bet you 50. You'll be impressed. Not a chance. I've already been surprised too many times today. It has been a whirlwind kind of day, hasn't it? She said. You can say that again, Sean agreed, but a very, very pleasant one, he added. You didn't sound like you believed me when I told you Daddy liked you, Abby suggested as she sipped her drink. I see what you mean by calling him an old bear. Yeah, but Daddy's harmless, she smiled. You two are close, aren't you? Yes, she beamed. That's how I can tell he thinks you're okay. You could have fooled me, Sean said, drinking from his bottle. Oh, he's like that with everybody at first. She waved her hand in dismissal. But he was speaking to you, wasn't he? Yeah, I guess so, Sean admitted. Well, there you go, said Abby, holding up her hands like the answer was obvious for anybody to see. That means he likes you, silly. They both laughed at that, and kept the conversation light until their dinner arrived. Sean was surprised again that evening when they set a porterhouse steak the size of a small state in front of him. Whoa, what's this? He said, surprised. You asked for the biggest steak we had. Well, that's 2 pounds of pure Virginia Black Angus. Enjoy your dinners. And she was off. Sean stared at the feast in front of him. The steak sat before him with a giant baked potato on a separate plate. I told you you'd be surprised, Abby said, taking a bite of her prime rib. Wait till you taste it. She said, feigning ecstasy. Sean cut a small piece and plopped it in his mouth. His face showed the pleasant surprise while he chewed. Abby was beaming, and they both dug into their meals, forgetting conversation until they were full. They lingered over coffee, enjoying small talk in each other's company. When the waitress brought the check, Abby snatched it up, saying she wasn't kidding. This was her treat to him before he was lost in that black hole of his new project. They compromised by Sean letting Abby get the bill, and he left a generous tip for the waitress. On the way back to the hotel, they were silent, each lost in their own thoughts. Abby was slowly getting furious with herself for the vein her thoughts were running. This morning things were great, business was good, and her life was in order. She had had a really good time tonight, she had to admit, but this was business. Or was it? She liked him a lot. He was fun and interesting to be around, plus he was good looking, and nice, and there was that thing she couldn't put a finger on, almost like a current of some kind. Yeah, that's it, she thought. It's like he's charged with some powerful electric current that runs just under the surface of his calm exterior, and it's drawing me in like a magnet. It has been such a long time. What would it hurt? No, you don't need it. Things are fine, he's just a client. Plus you've never just jumped into bed with anyone. You always hold out, stay in control, and make them pursue you. Sean was trying to think about the house, organize and reorganize in his head. Calls he'd have to make first thing, supplies he'd have to pick up, tools, clothes. His thoughts kept straying to Abby. God, she was an attractive woman. He just couldn't keep his thinking straight. He noticed the silence between them had grown heavy, not light and content like it had been earlier. She's probably getting nervous, he thought. This is no doubt the point in the evening where the other slob she had gone out with of late, her phrase, not his. This is no doubt where they had made some fumbling pass or innuendo and ruined a nice evening to that point. Sean figured her nervousness was in anticipation of the same from him. You couldn't blame them, Sean thought. Men are only human, and she is hot. He had promised her earlier she was safe, that he wouldn't make a pass, and he knew his conditioned discipline enough to know he wouldn't. But he knew he was also a man, and it sure wouldn't be easy. She pulled off the road under a brightly lit sign signifying his hotel, and pulled up in front of his room next to his old Jeep Wagoneer. She looked over at him and flashed him a nervous smile. When he smiled back, she averted her eyes. "So you planning on getting an early start tomorrow?" she asked, trying to fill the awkward silence. "Yeah," he sighed. "I can start making calls first thing, set things in motion, get to the stores when they open, get some supplies, and get things started. Check out of here at 11. I should be out there and started by noon." "I still think you're out of your mind. Oh, don't forget that list. I should be able to help," she said, finally looking nervously over at him. "Thanks," he said, extending his hand for a handshake. "Don't mention it," she said, taking the offered hand and shaking it firmly. Sean went to draw his hand away and open the door, but she held tight, making him look back at her. "You're not really going to keep that Boy Scout promise you made earlier, are you?" she asked breathlessly. That was all the encouragement Sean needed, and he pulled her to him, taking her in his arms and kissing her deeply. Her lips were hot, and her kiss seemed hungry, almost urgent. They parted after a minute, both somewhat breathless. "You better hurry and ask me for a nightcap before I chicken out," she whispered, biting his ear. Without a word, Sean opened his door, and got out, coming around to open her door. She shut off the car, and took his arm as they walked the few steps to his door. Sean produced the key after fumbling for a moment. The door finally opened, and he gallantly gestured for her to enter. She walked through the door, and tossed her purse on the closest chair. Sean followed her in, closed the door, and secured the chain. As he turned around, Abby was on him instantly, melting into his arms, her lips finding his. "What about your daughter?" Sean tried to ask as she hungrily sought his lips again. "Spring break," was all she said, by way of explanation, evoking Sean's own memories of that high school and college rite of passage. Surrendering, he kissed her back, long and hard. She pushed her generous breasts against his chest, and he responded instantly, beginning to grow erect. Not wanting to break the embrace, they stumbled towards the bed. After, they lay together, breathing heavily, a fine sheet of sweat glistening over their bodies. Abby looked over at Sean and saw him watching her, admiring her body. He smiled at her and rolled over and kissed her. "Hey, sailor, how about that drink you promised?" Abby said in a husky whisper. "Coming right up," he replied, and rolled out of bed in one fluid, graceful motion. She watched his muscles ripple as he walked, surprised. She had thought of him as tall and thin, but seeing him naked she saw how wrong she was. His clothes hid a lean, very well-muscled body, without an ounce of fat on it. He moved easily, gracefully. Again, Abby was reminded of a big cat's spare, effortless motion, but radiating power. She suppressed a chill that ran down her back. He retrieved 2 bottles of beer from the sink, smiling as he came back. "The ice is about gone, but they're still cold," he said, handing her the sweating, chilled bottle. "Thanks," she said, making no move to cover her nakedness. She liked the way his eyes were feasting on her body. He slipped into bed beside her and clinked his bottle to hers. "I want to propose a toast," he said in a serious tone. "To Abby Deacon, one absolutely incredible woman." They laughed easily, and Abby took a long swallow of her beer, trying to hide the fact she was blushing. "Thank you," she said, touching her fingers to his cheek. "Don't mention it," he said, kissing her fingers. She noticed the puckered scars on his chest, and reached for them tentatively, her brows knitting in concern. "It looks like Myra Connell's wall," she said absently as she traced them with her finger. "You didn't get these on a submarine, did you?" she questioned. He sighed deeply. "I wasn't stationed on the subs. I said I'd been on a few," he corrected. "Oh," she said, not understanding at all. "I was a SEAL," he said by way of explanation. "It stands for Sea, Air, and Land. It's the Navy Commando or Special Forces-like group." "Oh, like that movie with Charlie Sheen?" He chuckled. "Yeah, sort of, but not quite like that." Not wanting to get into it, he kissed her so she'd be quiet, and began kneading her breast. She reached down to grope him playfully, and her eyes grew wide to find him ready to go again. Without another word, they lay back down. "Anchors away," she whispered as another wave of pleasure swept her yet again.